One of my retirement hobbies is some relevance here. I raise bees, and there was a change of queens in the hive, and it was the local, the hive itself produced its own queen, not knowing what happened to the older one. But I can tell you that the older one, when she was around, the hive was as sweet and as docile and as productive as you could imagine. You could put your bare hand into the hive and you wouldn't be stung. Well, the new queen is in, and the rules have changed, and she has changed the behavior of all 80,000 bees in there. So you don't go out there without full protection. So this is a reflection on, management, leadership. I'm just changing order. Since I'm looking at you, I'll start with you, Ted. Is there a difference between being a good leader and being a good manager?
Absolutely. The old method of management or leadership was command and control. And we recognize today that that's pretty archaic, mainly because it's so inefficient. So leaders are able to engender good behavior, the best of the people who are working with them, instead of commanding it. And that's the essence of good leadership. It's not about command and control, it's about finding the context that brings out the best in people.
So how do you do it? How do you get that out of them?
Shared vision. It's not my way or the highway, it's our way. And the purpose of good leadership is to find out what our way is and to really pull that out of everyone.
I would use the word empowerment. Now, the empowerment of the people in the organization as you align your values and vision as it relates to the mission of your organization, regardless of what it is. And I think that's how you bring people to a shared vision.
Can you offer an example at Keene State?
Sure. This year we're going to be doing extensive strategic planning, and the first step is going to be writing a vision statement for the college, which will be created and crafted largely by the employees of the institution.
The one thing that I would add to both of those, and I agree with them, is that you need to show them instead of tell them. So maybe that's from going from command control to empowerment. You have to set the example and show them how to be good managers, how to be good leaders, and not just tell them how to do that. So it's the example that you show in everything that you do. Everything that you do is looked upon by all levels in the organization and outside of the organization of what you represent. So it comes with the privileges, but also the responsibilities of being a leader all the time.
All the time. Well, picking up on that, is there any job that's beneath a leader?
The answer is no. However, effective leaders delegate. So you're bringing everybody's potential up to their highest level. And if, as a leader, you're doing something beneath your highest level, then you're probably not doing an effective job delegating.
And I can add to that, and I think I refer to it as collective leadership, and it really truly is about having the right team and delegating. As long as there is that clear vision and strategic plan, and you're all shared in that vision, then let them go before you. And it kind of gets back to your comment, Jim, about leading from behind. It's very much my style because I have the right team in front of me.
Do leaders today face different challenges from, say, what they might have faced 20 or 30 years ago?
Oh, absolutely. The leadership is really about, and being, number one, it's about being effective. That the idea and what you saw really, coming out of the World War II generation, coming out of the 50s and the 60s, of a strong leader who really presented the ideas, and then everybody else had to get aboard. Those are gone. What you really have is the concept that everybody is encouraged to participate. I think Tedd referenced that early on. The command and control is gone. You know, you cannot create an effective organization on that basis. You really have to make everybody a part of that shared vision, and then they move forward together.
Kathy, I have another question for you. In the life of any organization, there's change. Sometimes conditions are wonderful, sometimes they're not. So in your experience as a leader, as a manager, how do different times require different leaders?
Absolutely. Certainly, and as you were talking, Mayor, I was thinking about the generational differences, certainly. So we talked about culture, we talked about being leaders, we talked about collective leadership. But I think even the generational differences with the youth coming into the workplace and what they expect and need as a generation versus what we needed and expected. And so I think there's that. There's the youth coming into the workplace, the reality that we have to get the youth in the workplace given the deluge of baby boomers that are going to be retiring. How are we cultivating those leaderships? So there's a lot that happens in the external environment that you have to adapt to, and United Way is a perfect example of that. You know, the way we always used to do business just isn't working anymore. There's a lot changing in the corporate sector, which we rely heavily on the corporate campaign, but there's not a lot of that local leadership or ownership anymore. So that's changed, and how you adapt to that as well.
Can you offer a specific example of adaptation?
Yeah, I would say it gets back to this collective impact approach. How can we, certainly in the nonprofit sector and specifically in human services, we have to come together as leaders in the community to really create population level change. You can't do it alone anymore.
What do you make of that?
I agree, and I also think, I would add to that leadership in times of good and plenty carries with it, I think, some opportunity. Leadership in times of crisis also does, and then everything in between. And you've heard a lot of people talk about a crisis as a terrible thing to waste, because it's an opportunity to galvanize an organization and to take some very positive steps that might be harder to take during times of good and plenty.
Can you offer an example of being in a crisis situation where you had to lead the institution out of it?
Sure. I think, as I look back over the course of my career and you look at how higher education has changed, the number of new entries into our competitive space has grown logarithmically in the last 10 years with for-profit colleges, online colleges. Those are the kinds of things that we never had to compete with before. And to be competitive in that, you have to develop agility, which is not a word you would typically use to describe colleges and universities that are so steeped in hundreds of years of tradition. And so being able to help people see that you need to make those changes without making it threatening, and around what is, I'm not going to have a job versus how is my job going to evolve to meet the challenges of today and tomorrow.
About crisis, we're in the home building business. We learned about crisis in a very personal way through the recession, which was caused by housing. It was about housing. And in order, to simply stay on the map, we had to reinvent ourselves 2 or 3 times over the course of 6 years and become a different company. So it was a really interesting, really exciting, and a real test of the organization that we had built up until then. Would those values hold true? And would they hold true if we were expecting and needed to expect something very different from everyone? And, we're happy to say we're here and still on the map, and we have reinvented ourselves. We're not the same company at all.
Sometimes I found that when you are operating under reduced circumstances and you're forced to make some decisions, you can come up with some fairly creative ones.
Yes.
Do you have any examples regarding the city, and as I say, decisions that were really forced on you by funding realities that led you to some results that were more pleasing than you would imagine.
Well, one of the examples that immediately comes to mind is snow plowing. Snow plowing of the streets in Keene is something which we have to do, just as snow plowing at the airport is something we have to do. Previously, we would bring in additional people when we were going to have a storm to do the snow plowing. It was extremely inefficient. It was also extremely expensive. So now we cross-train people. For instance, we use people within the recreation department to drive snowplows. We use people that are already fully employed by the city to actually go. We now cross-train them so that they do the plowing. So we don't bring in extra people. We save several $100,000 by not utilizing outside resources to perform that service. We no longer maintain a crew at the airport primarily for snow plowing and winter maintenance. We use resources now from Public Works, we use resources from the Recreation Department, we use resources from other areas within the city to perform those services when they have to be done.
Home mortgages, through the crisis of the mid-2000s and late 2000s, we were presented with the Dodd-Frank bill, which changed the rules in terms of taking some of our subjectivity out of some of the ratios that we put into mortgages. And so culturally, where things before could be a little using more judgment, they're much stricter now. So that's going the opposite way. What we're finding, we need to go deeper into the organization, really with some of our younger staff, to have ideas bubble up on how we create a different mousetrap. So, things that we wouldn't have thought about even 5 years ago, accepting an online application for a mortgage. The rules have changed. It was only a couple of generations ago where in banking, you couldn't have competition coming into your area. The state defined, the boundaries of where banks could go. Then we had interstate banking, increased competition, and now competition comes from us over the web every single day. So part of it is going deeper into the organization, saying, how do we compete in a different world, and creating a culture that you have people coming forward with different ideas, that instead of saying, no, this is the way we do it, say, this is what we want you to bring forth, and see if there's a way where we can do it. But we still live, we still work within a regulated industry where some of the grayers become clear, black and white. So if that's the case, everything's commoditized. So how do we compete in that world? It's service. It is creating something a little bit different, and we need the younger generation to help us figure out some of that.
Design a textbook on leadership. What would be among the first chapters in that book?
Integrity. If you don't have that, you cannot effectively lead. You may, manage for a while, but at the end of the day, if you don't operate yourself, conduct yourself to a high degree of integrity and transparency, so that you are constantly representing the values of your organization, because core values of an organization don't typically change. The direction that you might be moving in, or as you said, remaking the company, but I'm sure the core values didn't change. And so you've got to have that, and people need to perceive their leader as genuine. People will follow and work with someone who is genuine, who has integrity, and who is transparent in the manner in which they conduct their business, and who makes their decisions based on the values of the organization.
Are there unpleasant parts of the job of being a leader?
I think it's on most who haven't sat in a leadership position probably underestimate the number of decisions you make every day.
Mm-hmm.
Some are they seem benign, others are significant if they're allocation of resources, or having to let somebody go, or buying fixed assets. But the number of decisions, and if you always go back to a set of principles that have character and integrity, and are disciplined to use those as your guiding post, then you still sometimes will make a bad choice. But you can do so believing at that point with the information that you had. And sometimes you can take a lot of time to make that decision. Sometimes you have to do it on the moment. Then at least you can say that I made it with these principles in mind, and I never veered from those values that are so important to the organization and to yourself.